All right, we have a busy agenda. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First, I would like to ask for a motion to approve the agenda. Yes. Second. All right, we've got a first and a second. Any discussion? Tessa, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Orloff,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley,
Yes.
Commissioner Pierce Mushin,
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Commissioner Wade,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moore.
Yes. The agenda is approved. We will move on to consideration of the minutes from the June 25th Planning Commission meeting. Do we have any amendments to those minutes? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes. Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Tessa, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Whitley,
Here.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Commissioner Wade,
Yes.
Commissioner Pierce Mushin. Yes. Commissioner Orloff,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moore.
Yes. Minutes from June 25th, 2026 meeting are approved. At this time, we will be moving to public comment on non-agenda items. I know we have lots of folks here, but if you have a comment you would like to make about an item that is not on today's agenda, this would be your opportunity to make a comment. We ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes long. Does anyone wish to make a public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to our action items. Our first item tonight is continuation of SR 2602, Jamie Reed for a setback reduction. SR 22-026-02, Jamie Reed of Hamlet Construction on behalf of Grace Dinsdale for a setback reduction to construct an addition to a non-conforming structure. The subject property is located at 4572 Logan Lane in a residential lower density zone. The application will be reviewed against the criteria of Cannon Beach Municipal Code, section 1764, setback reduction. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to hear this matter at this time? Does any commission member believe he or she has a conflict of interest or personal bias? Has any commission member had any ex parte contacts or made a site visit? Site visit. Do we have a staff report?
Thank you. This application is for a setback reduction application for a remodel to a non-conforming residence. The initial evidentiary hearing on the application was on June 25th, last month's planning commission hearing. During that hearing, the planning commission continued this item with a request the applicant provide the following additional information. 1, an arborist report detailing construction impacts. 2, a survey showing the location of the banks and stream corridor at the bottom of the ravine north of the property and the required 10-foot buffer area. And 3, an ocean front setback survey demonstrating that the work conforms to the ocean front setback line. As of the start of this meeting, the city has not received any new information regarding this application.
Okay. If I'm correct, there were no documents for this application within our packet. Is that correct?
No additional information service.
The pertinent criteria to be considered are noted in the staff reports and listed on the criteria sheets at the meeting page of the city's website. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward those criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or municipal code, which the person testifying believes to apply to this decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal based on that issue. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the chair, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. At this time, I will ask, is there a presentation by the applicant? Come on up.
I printed some copies.
Okay.
Okay. You guys wanted to see the high water mark and the location of the trees, our erosion control plan. Yeah, I made 10. I can't remember how many people were here, so I don't know.
Thank you.
And the parking easement on the adjacent lot. Did I need to? Did you need them? I didn't know if you guys wanted distances from the trees. But this has the location of the trees to where they are and the distances, but they're all about 12 feet away. All three trees. There's only one that's in the middle. That is the concern of the arborist report. Where the root's going like 45 degrees down. And it's about 2 feet down the slope, so that's why he dug an exploration hole. To see if it was coming back up anywhere. But we're gonna go with the concrete. Anyways, that you saw on the plans that show us just not putting concrete where that root is. I believe the creek is 34 feet away. You guys were concerned there was a 10-foot distance, and that's as the crow flies. It actually goes down a pretty deep ravine. And I can help you if any of that looks confusing.
Has this parking easement been recorded?
So one more time.
Has the parking easement been recorded?
It's been sent to the county. I don't know if it's been recorded because he just got all of that stuff done last week. But that's the language he's submitted.
Maybe commission members, questions that you would like to ask at this time? Yeah. Is there anything that you would wish to present in addition to the materials that you just provided us?
I'm sorry, one more time.
Is there anything you wish to present to us in addition to these materials?
No, the original plans where it shows the parking spots, that's what he's recorded. So I didn't show you a picture, but it's in the original plans. That's what he's putting as an easement, as far as the drawing. And I think you guys saw that last time, but it was just, we were putting it there, and you said it had to be an easement to that property.
But the person that owns the property where you're going to do the work actually does own that lot.
Yes,
Across.
yes.
Okay. Probably another question to you. I'm curious from the city's perspective if we still have to have a parking variance.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have questions for the applicant?
That could have been my confusion, because I thought the easement did that. I didn't know that was a separate.
Yeah.
Thing.
Is everyone ready for me to move on?
Yeah. We want to enter this into the record, right? Yeah, really part of the record, yeah.
Thank you. You'll have one more opportunity to speak after I finish calling for proponents and opponents.
Do I go sit down?
Yes, thanks. At this time, are there any presentations by proponents regarding this application? Do we have anyone online?
No.
Okay. And are there any presentations by opponents to this application? Anyone online?
No.
And is there a staff response?
As per the previous staff report. The staff recommendation is that the department recommends approval of the application with the condition that the applicant satisfy the on-street parking requirements before building permit is issued. With the parking variance for off-street parking and also with the other additional conditions of approval, which include all required building permits be obtained prior to the start of work and erosion control fencing be placed prior to the start of work and maintained for the duration of the project.
Thank you. Does the applicant wish to make any additional statements before we close the record?
Do I get up and
I just say.
Sure, one more staff.
Yeah,
Okay.
before, in closing the record, you would have the pros and cons to comment on.
Yes,
I think that I got everything for you except for the. The parking variance. I hope that if that is the only thing. I can get approved and I will do that tomorrow. I just got confused. I thought the easement was. Did that, so I'm sorry that I didn't have that in the works for you guys. That's all.
yes. Are there any proponents who wish to make additional statements? And are there any opponents who wish to make additional statements? This time, we will close the record and move to deliberation. Who would like to begin?
I appreciate getting all this information. Thank you very much. And, I agree a parking plan should be recorded. But I think that's very helpful.
Jamie, I also appreciate getting this information to us. Looks like you've covered, everything we asked at the department for. Looks like the trees are not going to be a problem. It's a concern of mine, and I think others, on the commission here, especially the roof that is going to be, potentially involved with the foundation. But you're putting a culvert over that also to protect it, it looks like. And I appreciate the, information about how far you are from the stream corridor. So it looks like, there's some room there for you to build what you're looking at building the, addition. Again, I'll just emphasize that, the environment is, in that area is very sensitive and most important. So any erosion controls and things need to be maintained throughout construction. Not just put up and then ignored throughout construction, which I see many times. Absolutely sure with that, we do that, but those are my concerns, and thank you very much for this information.
Thank you.
Do we have any other points of discussion?
I'll simply add that I think that we've got everything we asked for here, and I don't see any cause for concern personally.
Do we have a motion? Are we ready for that?
I moved to approve. The SR 2602 with the condition that the parking variance is applied for, and And you have that before you get your building permit, that's going to be a requirement from the, city staff. So,
Do we also want to add the suggested, proper building permits and erosion control as conditions?
yeah, I think that's what it is.
Yes.
Yes, I thought that was part of the permit, so it was going to be the erosion controls and that need to be part of the motion. I will make that part of the motion, so let me start over again. I move to approve SR 2602 with necessary environmental and erosion controls. With, also the, variance for the parking and easement. And what was the other item?
The, proper building.
Proper building permit, which can only be given after you get the proper parking.
Do we have a second? Second? Any further discussion? Tessa, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Orwell,
Yes.
Commissioner Ridley,
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson, yes, Commissioner Wade,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moore.
Yes. SR 26-02 is approved. We will now be moving on to the next agenda item. This is a type 4 legislative hearing regarding the legislative public hearing of ZO 26-01 proposed text amendments to municipal code, chapter 1784, short-term rental. ZO 26-01, City of Cannon Beach requests to place a short-term rental cap and related zoning ordinance text amendments to chapter 1784, short-term rentals. The proposed zoning ordinance text amendment would limit the number of 14-day permits in the City of Cannon Beach to provide other related minor changes to the short-term rental provisions of Cannon Beach Municipal Code, chapter 84, short-term rentals of title 17, zoning. The zoning text amendment request will be reviewed against the criteria of the municipal code, section 1794-060A, amendment criteria and statewide planning rules. This legislative hearing to amend the municipal code is being held after providing a written notice of the hearing to the proposed amendments to the code to DLCD in compliance with ORS 197-610. In addition, ORS 227-186 requires the city to provide written notice of the amendments and hearing to owners of real property when the city proposes to adopt or amend the code in a manner that limits or prohibits land uses previously allowed in the affected zones. Notice of this hearing has been provided to parties entitled to notice as required by those statutes. Type 4 actions are made by the city council's adoption of the ordinance. Cannon Beach Municipal Code 1714-050C provides that type 4 actions shall be decided by the city after a public hearing. The city council may also request that the planning commission hold a public hearing in advance of the city council hearing to consider the proposal, public testimony, and provide a recommendation. The city council has requested that the planning commission hold a public hearing in advance of the city council's hearing to consider the proposed amendments, public testimony, and provide a recommendation. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the planning commission to hear this matter at this time? Hearing no objections, do we have a staff report?
Yes, thank you. Plan Commission discussion regarding short-term rental cap began in April 9, 2024, and has been on the Planning Commission's agenda repeatedly since. At the City Council December 19, 2025 annual retreat, the council asked to move the short-term rental cap ordinance discussion to the Planning Commission for their consideration. The Planning Commission had held 3 more sessions on the proposed language changes to place a cap on the number of 14-day permits to 165. The current number of short-term rental permits continues to remain around 200 total permits, with approximately 155 of those permits being 14-day permits. A cap of 165 would equate to a reduction of 17.5% of total permits if projected into the future, as current lifetime permits would eventually expire and would then be required to submit for 14-day permitting to continue. The public has suggested limiting future short-term rental by zone, denying any new short-term rental permits to properties east of Highway 101. There are currently 6 east of the highway as shown in the attached presentation. The other proposed language regards placing restrictions on new short-term rentals within 100 feet from active permit. When these 100-foot buffers are considered, they would account for 55% of all properties in Cannon Beach and the majority of the residentially zoned properties. Other jurisdictions have implemented proximity-related measures such as zoning or buffers, have faced attempts to game the system by property owners, where owners apply for short-term rental permits with no intent on renting, just to ward off adjacent properties from having short-term rentals. Language is included, in the ordinance to limit that. At the June 9th, this council special meeting and work session, the city council directed staff to move forward with an application for the short-term rental cap without the buffer or geographic or zonal restriction. And that's the language that is supplied. Further, let me get to the addendum. So this came in 3 packets. The first packet was posted in relation to the Measure 56 numbers to everyone so that people would have all the material that you guys had seen in your previous meetings on this, or work sessions, and to have the latest available draft. And so following that, we released the addendum, which also held the statewide planning goals and comments on that. It also held a quite substantial packet, Commissioner Risley showed us. Clatsop County Votable Lands Inventories included, the Cannon Beach Housing Supply Inventory is also in there. The Clatsop County Housing Supply Assessment was included, and the Clatsop County Housing Inventories Cannon Beach Infrastructure Summary Memo was also included. I wanted you guys to have the latest material that we have on housing up until tonight's meeting, and that includes all of the studies that were done here in 24 and 25 with Clatsop County, which I included in those packets. We also, in the addendum packet that was posted last week, was also a new public comment from Margot Duber that was included. And just today, prior to this meeting, we released what we had received over the last week, and that includes 2 more public comments. One from Christian Zabanik on behalf of Kim Villeneuve, trustee of the Kim Villeneuve Revocable Trust, and Kathleen Mitchell. We released that around noon, which is what we normally do on commission days, hearing dates, so that we can get the latest materials to you. If you haven't read those, we do have a couple more copies at the table. Just let me know if you haven't seen those 2 public comments, but that's all the new materials that we have in since the packet was released and posted last week. Any comments or thoughts?
Any questions? At this time, we'll move to public testimony. This is a legislative hearing, so the quasi judicial disclosures do not apply. As such, the planning commission will commence with taking testimony. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the chair, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. The planning commission would like to hear from everyone this evening, so we request limited testimony to 3 minutes per person. Would anyone like to comment on these proposed amendments? Feel free to come up.
Evening, thanks for taking testimony tonight, Planning Commission. My name is Christian Zapuntic. My mailing address is 615 Broadway Street, 0216, Seaside, Oregon, 97138. And I'm here on behalf of Kim Villeneuve, who is at 1916 South Hemlock in Cannon Beach. I'm one of the later public comments. So if you don't have a copy of the letter that I've written, it should be up here, or else I think it's actually posted. I think Jeff sent it. So I'll let that letter and all the details that are in it speak for itself, but it basically has to do with the effect of what these short-term rental caps are gonna have on sale or transfer, just the way that you define that phrase, right? Sale or transfer. You got a lot of folks out there who have these permits already. And particularly my client is worried about how this can be transferred to other people, to family, to that sort of a thing. So when you look at other provisions that aren't necessarily in this ordinance, they're kind of buried in the definition section of the Cannon Beach Municipal Code. It's important to look at those and I think to really redefine those and make them clear in the context of this short-term rental cap, if it goes into effect. And again, I'll let the letter speak for itself, but, what's not in the letter that I just wanted to comment on publicly is there are other jurisdictions, obviously, that have already enacted short-term rental caps and some that have decided not to enact them at all. So for example, the county, Clatsop County does have caps. But as far as how that relates to transferability, they've decided to let their short-term rental permits be freely transferable. That's to anybody. So for example, you sell your house, you can transfer it to whoever that you sell your house to. City of Seaside does not necessarily have caps. They have kind of a hybrid cap that's based on density of other short-term rental permits. But they also have a transferability provision that allows transfers to certain people, especially by inheritance or other family members. So that I think is a good example to take a look at the way that they handle their sort of transfer clause in the context of what's kind of a hybrid cap. So the other aspect of this, the last thing I'll point out is I did not see it in the actual proposed language of the revision or the amendment. But just to make sure that there is a provision in there for allowing these permits to be renewed, because I noticed that they expire after a year. And so you don't want to have those expire and then all of a sudden there's a cap. So keeping that language in there will help this ordinance stay much more clear. That's it. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to make comments? Please come out.
Hello, my name is Christina Porter. My mailing address is 1400 2nd Avenue North, apartment 289, Seattle, Washington, 98109. I'm a homeowner on East Jefferson Street, and I'm here today to ask a question on behalf of my neighbor, Mary Ellen Kennedy, who is on East Washington Street. Mary Ellen's question is, I currently own a home with a valid 14-day short-term rental permit. Under the proposed ordinance, if ownership changes due to the death of a spouse, probate, or transfer to a surviving spouse or a living trust, would that be considered a transfer that automatically revokes the permit? Or are there exceptions for estate administration and inheritance? So if a spouse dies and the house was in the name of the spouse, and in the estate planning, the house transfers to the surviving spouse, does the permit transfer to the surviving spouse? Or is that considered the type of transfer that would cancel out the permit?
Does Jeff have that in?
No, we're not.
We don't-
We're taking-
we don't answer
we're not
that.
providing.
Okay.
So that would be a question for our land use attorney, and if you have questions, you can direct it to our planning department, they could help you obtain an answer.
Okay. So what you're saying is that there is a provision in that?
Right now, we're just taking public testimony, we're not engaging
Oh,
in
okay.
explaining
Okay,
the code as it stands, and that's something we would refer to our attorney.
all right. Okay, so I have a question then as a homeowner. I don't understand the reason for the cap. Like, why is that necessary? What problem are you trying to solve with putting in a new cap?
we tend to take public comment and then we will have discussion, and I'm guessing that during the discussion that answer may be.
This is the first time I've ever been to a meeting like this, so I've got no idea how it works, but okay, I'll leave that.
Yes, please.
I'm Sandy Dodson, 92400 Beth Road in Astoria. I'm here on behalf of Beachcomber Vacation Homes. I am the general manager of Beachcomber Vacation Homes. We manage more than 100 homes in Cannon Beach and Arch Cape. More importantly, we employ over 45 local people who work every day to help make Cannon Beach the special place that so many people have come to know and love. I also serve as the acting president of the Cannon Beach Chamber of Commerce because I deeply care about the future of this community. Everything I do, rather at Beachcomber or through the chamber, is focused on preserving what makes Cannon Beach so special, while ensuring it remains a place where local families can live, work, and thrive. I've lived in Clatsop County for 42 years. I've raised my children here, and now I have the privilege of watching them raise their own families. Having stable employers that provide good paying jobs is one of the reasons families are able to stay in our community instead of being forced to leave. Beachcomber is not just a business that manages homes. We are a local employer. We provide livable wages, fully paid health insurance for our full-time employees, end of summer bonuses, Christmas bonuses. These are careers that allow people to raise their family here in Clatsop County. Beachcomber does more than just check guests in and out. We answer late night calls, respond to emergencies, make sure the homes are safe, clean, and well maintained, and work hard to ensure our guests are respectful to neighbors. We remind them of our community's rules and expectations because we know that the people who live here full-time deserve peace and respect. There is something truly magical about Cannon Beach. There's a reason we all live here and continue to love this community. Every day I get to hear why people are coming to Cannon Beach. Some families have been vacationing here for generations, long before I was even born. Others come after experiencing heartbreaking loss because this is where they find comfort and healing. They come to celebrate anniversaries, unite with families, and simply spend time together away from the distractions of everyday life. Those visitors also support local economy. They eat at our restaurants, shop at our stores, visit our galleries, hire local services, and help sustain business throughout the year. That economic activity supports jobs well beyond the vacation rental industry. I understand why this conversation is happening. Growth needs to be managed, and it's important to preserve what makes Cannon Beach unique. I also recognize that not everyone shares the same perspective on vacation rentals. My hope is simply that as you consider this ordinance, you also consider the people whose livelihoods depend on this industry. Cannon Beach already has some of the most restrictive short-term rental regulations on the Oregon coast. The current 14-day rule significantly limits how often these homes can be rented while helping to preserve neighborhood character. If the city determines a cap is necessary, I respectfully ask that you consider setting that cap at 200 permits. A cap at that level would provide certainty for our future while recognizing the significant role vacation rentals play in supporting local jobs, businesses, and family. Finally, I ask that you all remember that behind every permit is more than just a house. There are homeowners who have invested in this community, local businesses that rely on tourism, and employees like mine at Beachcomber who work hard every day to keep Cannon Beach clean, welcoming, and one of the most beloved destinations on the Oregon coast. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to make a comment?
Michelle Aller, PO Box 719,
You all know why I'm here, because I'm here all the time. Okay, so while I agreed with Randy Neal's suggestion of exclusion areas and density restrictions, I originally thought the cap would be an easy step to keep STRs under control. And begin to alleviate our extreme lack of attainable and workforce housing. Here, I'm holding my first public comment about STRs from September 2022. Almost 4 years later, we still have no movement. Please apply the cap now. Thank you so much.
Does anyone else wish to make public comment?
Hi, Jeff Shutt, the newly retired executive chef of Gatsby, right here in Cannon Beach. Speaking on behalf of Kathleen Mitchell, my fiance from 16024 Southeast Court, 250th Court in Covington, Washington, 98042. Starting with the short-term rental cap ordinance here. My fiance first stumbled upon Cannon Beach on a trip in 1988, and it's been an essential part of her life ever since. While attracted to the small town charm and quaintness of the community, she purchased the home in 2015 and has enjoyed and cared about the future of the community. However, she realizes that a stagnant city is not the solution towards a healthy and vibrant community. She respectfully opposes the proposed cap on a 14-day short-term rental permits. The available evidence provided in the staff report summary dated July 23, 2026 does not demonstrate that a 14-day STRs pose a threat to public health, safety, general welfare, or have adverse impacts on the parking and congestion issues the city faces. All stated reasons for the cap. Moreover, a fixed cap could unnecessarily limit economic activity and reduce important city revenues while doing little to address the community's workforce housing challenges. If the city determines that a cap is necessary, she urges consideration of a percentage-based approach that can adapt as the community grows. I'm in agreement for there. No demonstrated public harm. A primary justification for any new regulation should be clear evidence that it addresses a documented problem. In this case, the city's overview does not support the conclusion that 14-day STRs are causing disproportionate impact on the community. The staff report and public comments acknowledge that nuisance data collected to the date has not shown STRs to be more prone to complaints than other forms of housing. Furthermore, the available data does not distinguish between impacts associated with short-term rentals, hotel lodgings, and those associated with day use visitors. The number of STR permits have remained relatively stable for more than a decade at approximately 200 permits with no significant increase in complaints, safety incidents, or other documented problems attributed to 14-day STRs. Public testimony has also noted that as Cannon Beach's housing stock has grown, the percentage of homes operated as STRs actually declined. These facts suggest that the proposed cap is not a response to a worsening trend, but rather a precautionary measure unsupported by clear evidence. Without a demonstrated connection between the proposed cap and an improvement in public health, safety, or welfare, parking, and congestion issues, restriction risks appear arbitrary and may be difficult to justify to property owners and community members alike. A fixed cap will not solve workforce housing. Workforce housing is an important issue. I can attest to that as a chef here. And deserves thoughtful and effective solutions. However, there is little evidence that reducing the number of 14-day STR permits will meaningfully increase the availability of affordable or workforce housing. Comments submitted during the public process have highlighted the lack of evidence that STR is responsible for the shortage of long-term rental housing in Cannon Beach. In addition, the staff materials acknowledge that a cap alone will not create affordable housing opportunities. Limiting STR permits may reduce property owner flexibility, but it does not guarantee that affected properties will become housing for local workers. If the city's objective is to increase workforce housing, well, policy should be designed to specifically achieve that goal rather than relying on indirect measures where effectiveness has not been demonstrated. Fiscal and economic consequences. Short-term rentals provide meaningful economic benefits to Cannon Beach. According to information presented during the public process, STRs generate approximately $700,000 annually in tax revenue, or roughly $3,500 per permitted unit. These revenues help support essential city services, including emergency response, public safety functions. Reducing the number of STR permits could reduce these revenues and place additional pressure on the city's budget for these resources. STRs also contribute to the local economy by supporting restaurants, such as mine, property management companies, maintenance providers, cleaning services, contractors, and other small businesses. A reduction in STR activity could have ripple effects throughout the community, local, economically, and potentially affecting jobs, business revenues, and overall visiting spending. A better alternative would be a percentage cap, as we feel. If the city determines that some limitation on STR permits is necessary, a percentage-based cap would provide a more balanced and adaptable approach than a fixed number cap as proposed. A fixed cap does not account for future residential growth. As additional housing units are built, which we see all around us, the percentage of homes allowed to operate as STRs would continue to decline regardless of community needs or changing conditions. By contrast, a percentage-based cap would maintain the city's desired balance while allowing the number of permits to grow proportionally with the housing stock. For example, the city could establish a provision stating 14-day short-term rental permits shall not exceed 10% of the total housing units within the city, with the allowable number recalculated annually, not by 5 years as current. Such an approach would preserve flexibility, avoid arbitration restrictions, and ensure that future policy remains aligned with the growth of the community. We want to address directly the support workforce housing. To address the workforce housing concern more directly, we encourage the city to dedicate a portion of STR generated tax revenue to housing initiatives. Workforce Housing Fund, Housing Trust Fund, or a similar program to provide financial support for projects that create housing opportunities for local workers. This approach would connect STR-related revenues to a tangible housing solution rather than relying on a permit cap whose effectiveness remains uncertain. So in conclusion, for these reasons, we urge the Planning Commission and City Council not to adopt Pro 6 cap on 14-day short-term rental permits. The available evidence does not demonstrate that such a restriction is necessary to protect public health, safety, or welfare, parking, or congestion issues of the community, nor does it appear likely to solve Cannon Beach's workforce housing challenges.
Does anyone else wish to make a comment? Well,
Cannon City RFP box 956, Cannon Beach, Oregon, it's 3723 Cole Street address. In reply to the economy thing that I've heard a couple of people talk about, we're here every day. I mean, we live here in the winter when it's crummy. I'm going to Mariners Market, I'm in Fresh Food, I'm at Coastal Theater, and so are all the people we know who live here. So I think the economic thing is kind of the bogus issue. It's just not. Sure, it spends money, sure, people come in, I can't deny that, but it's like we are here doing that every day. So it's like to kind of cast us aside is kind of just taps my hand for a little bit. Anyway, and this is not part of the housing issue. You know, as far as like workforce housing, this wasn't brought up to deal with that at all. That's not part of the issue. I mean, that is a long-term issue for Cannon Beach. Places like Cannon Beach, you know, vacation places, Telluride or whatever, that's kind of what you're gonna deal with. You know, that's some kind of a problem that we have to kind of figure out. Also, the parking issue, you know, it is an issue. Where we live in Haystack Heights, what started happening because they put the toll in the toll amount of parking, people started to park up Warren Way. You know, we had access 2 lanes. That's it. It's not adequate as it is. There are people parking there on weekends that make that 1 lane. It's like if something happens, somebody needs to get in. They're gonna take 1 car to get cattywampus, and we're stuck. That, you know, so parking is an issue. The other thing, you know, and particularly close to home, it's like where these short-term rentals are, and they are a disturbance at times. I had to call in for one not too long ago myself. It's like, you know, people, it's like 11 o'clock at night, I don't know if they were unsupervised kids screaming, yelling, playing loud music, and it's like, and then when I called up code enforcement, I'm told because they didn't call the police, that might not count. So I thought, you know, they said they would notify the management and the owners, and I was good with that, that's fine. But it's like, what's code enforcement for? You know, so there are issues with short-term rentals. That's just the truth of it. You know, you can't just say that it's not. And the parking is an issue. There's cars on the street that, you know, you have 4 or 5 cars parked in front of a place, that happens. So, I mean, I would encourage some kind of, you know, the percentage thing, that's a possibility. Or the cap now is actually, there's more homes. 165, there's actually, you know, several people mentioned it's 200, around 200, you know, 190, somewhere in that ballpark that are going on there. How are those places, and I understand somebody owns a place, you know, but how are those LLCs or trust, how are those transferred? Or how do those grandfather out to reduce the number? That is an issue. So I'd like to just say this, I like the cap, and please do something. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to make public comment? Going once, going twice. Do we have anyone else in the room? Okay, do we have anyone online who wishes to comment?
Yes, we have a Zoom user.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Zoom user.
Hello, can you hear us? Looks like they might be muted still.
They're still muted.
I don't know if you can hear us, but if you'd like to make a comment, we would like you to unmute and speak when you're ready.
Do we want to move on?
Let's move on.
Next. Zoom user.
Hello?
Hello, if you'd like to make a public comment for tonight's hearing.
Yeah, sorry about the technical inadequacy on my end. My name's Herbert Florer, P.O. Box 546, Cannon Beach. And I just wanted to say 2 questions, but they're rhetorical, so I'm not asking for an answer and understanding it's not a discussion. The one was actually that was brought up is pretty good. What problem are we really trying to solve here? I've spoken to you before. I don't want to take a lot of your time because you've listened to me before. But the levels have been so constant for so long that again, what? And by the same token, what urgency is there here when the levels have been so constant for so long? There's nothing that's changed here, especially when there's been, you know, over and over again demonstration that there is no relationship between almost all of the short-term rental housing in town and affordable housing in town. Unfortunately, we all know what the prices in town are. So I personally think a cap's not a bad thing. I've said this to you before. For the future, I don't think it's necessary right now, but I think the 195 to 200 that you've heard is more reasonable than what is basically really a reduction, not a cap, of using the 165, given the total number of the various types of rentals that exist now and might in the future. And finally, I do understand the concerns of some of the folks, notably from Haystack Heights, that live in maybe a more residential part of town than some of the parts down maybe near the ocean that are a bit more expensive in terms of the price of homes, and have suggested some sort of solution in terms of number of housing that can be there or boundaries or things like that. I think that's probably problematic in terms of equity. I'm not sure how that would fly, but I did have a thought. The city seems to have a pretty good grasp on where second homes are that are unused and where the residential homes are, such as Haystack Heights, and again, understand their concerns and appreciate them. What about having some sort of a boundary that's related not to east of the highway or Haystack Heights, but to the number of homes in a given block that are second homes versus residents? And that's all I wanted to throw out there. Sorry to complicate things. And as always, thank you for your time and your efforts.
Thank you. Robert, do we have anyone else online?
No.
All right, I will give us one last chance. Anyone else wish to make a public comment at this time? In that case, we will move on to deliberation. Actually, I think the first asked, do the staff have a response there?
I don't think so. I think in the, the question of why, or first off on the why front, there's plenty of public testimony and we'll get into the deliberation discussion wise. So I don't need to, that's a legislative. I did want to know, however, with regards to taking this claims as short-term rental and the language referred to in the land use definition section of the Cannon Beach Municipal Code, it should be noted that those definitions have been in place since 2017, along with the lifetime unlimited permit, 14-day permit language with the same terms of sale or transfer without any challenges. The city's land use attorney also wanted to note that short-term rental permits have been found by courts to be revocable licenses, which typically are not subject to takings law. Moreover, the courts have upheld caps on short-term rental permits and limits on transferability as valid exercises of city's police power to protect the law, health, welfare, and safety of its citizens.
All right, we will move on to deliberations. Would anyone like to start?
Where to start? For me, some of the comments, about the 165 cap kind of ring true, and I'm more concerned about the density than I am about the number. And I think if we address the density issue, then, by attrition, we'll also have a reduction or a reasonable number that are reduced when those permits are no longer renewed. Similar to the grandfathered unlimited licenses, they will be reduced. So like something like a density restriction of 100 feet or even 150 feet, that gets the density out of some of the neighborhoods that have high density and have a lot of STRs in them. The cap, as some comments noted, may or may not be needed because for the last decade, we've had right around the same number, 165 or so. I do realize there may be some value in putting a cap in place to, so we can control and improve future growth. But for me, the density aspect, not having too many in one neighborhood makes better sense than having a cap. And I'm wrestling with the comments on the exclusion area east side of 101. That is an equity issue. There are people on the west side of 101 that would like to have the same thing, and everybody can't have that exclusion unless we exclude the whole town. We also have parking issues in every neighborhood, and that's not necessarily due to the STRs, because the STRs are required to have adequate parking for the number of guests that they can accommodate. They have the off-street parking. The parking issue for me, where on this narrow street that I live on, they park on both sides, and during some holidays this year, you couldn't get a fire truck or an ambulance or anybody down there if there was an emergency, you couldn't get them down the street, but that's an entirely different issue, I think, that needs to be addressed in a different fashion rather than through the STR issue. But it is an issue that I think needs to be addressed, and I've made comments to city council to that effect. So furthermore, on the east side exclusion, I haven't heard really adequate factual base for that neighborhood exclusion that is different or unique than any of the other neighborhoods that are experiencing the same kind of issues with STRs. If we were to restrict those, I think there's 6 units on the other side of 101 right now. If we were to take those and move them through attrition again onto the west side of 101, then that would just increase the density on the west side. And I wouldn't let anybody on the west side allow them to increase the density of people on the east side. If we were to say, well, there's a cap on the west side because we have so many, well, let's, open up the east side. That doesn't seem fair either. So moving them around to different densities in different areas doesn't resonate at this point. And I know that neighborhood. I've spent some time in that neighborhood. It's a lovely neighborhood, as many of the neighborhoods in Cannon Beach are. But I just have not heard what I need to hear that makes it so that we can be equitable with everyone while excluding those neighborhoods east of 101. They already are a lot of times excluded from some of the high traffic and the tourist activity that is experienced on the west side of 101. One other thing that wasn't brought up tonight, but that I've been thinking about, and I mentioned it briefly, maybe last meeting or the meeting before, and that is changing the 14-day permits to twice a month permits. So I talked to some of the city staff, and it would make their jobs easier. The other thing it would do, it would reduce the number of visits available to STR units by 2 per year. So it would give them more flexibility. It would reduce the 26, if you buy 365 and a 14, you go up with 26. So you have 26 visitors currently. If we were to change it to twice a month, it would give flexibility to the STR owners, maybe even increase some of the taxes to the city, but reduce the number of visits to each one of those STR units by 2 per year. That flexibility that I'm talking about would be, they would be able to rent, say, for President's Day and Valentine's Day, or for Christmas and New Year's both. So they could get a greater income, which means greater taxes to the city. However, at 2 a month, that's 24 rather than 26. So we have a bit of a reduction, but I think it works in favor of everyone. And in fact, the algorithm that we have to use for once every 14 days is a lot tougher to manage than having just 2 per month. So that would make it easier, I think, on everybody.
I would just remind everyone that from the staff report, we know city council has asked that we consider a cap only, and that that's what we're being asked to consider. That said, I would respectfully disagree with regard to there not being a difference between the east side and the west side. I think that one of the reasons this conversation began was about having appropriate housing for people who live and work here. And those areas are the people who live and work here predominantly. And I think it is important, because one of the purposes of this discussion is about housing, to protect that stock of housing.
Well,
That said, I recognize we're not making a recommendation on
the
housing.
housing isn't the issue this evening, though, as far as I'm concerned, because we see that really the real issue with lack of housing is second homes that aren't used and aren't STRs. We've got 10% of STRs, which has been that way for a decade. Yet we have a considerably greater amount of homes that aren't used, except for second homes, those are the vacant ones. And if we excluded, in my mind, if we excluded anything east of 101, it would make them less affordable because they'd be more attractive to people who didn't want STRs in them. So I think that can work both ways. And on the street that I live on, I've got 4 people on the street that are full-time. 3 of them work full-time. 3 of those occupants work full-time. So in my neighborhood, as well as other neighborhoods, there are still working families on the west side that would like the same kind of consideration as anybody on the east side. So, you know, is it fair to move those 6 houses over to the west side, which is in fact what that would be doing through attrition? Whatever the cap is, whatever the restrictions on density are, whatever is over on the east side will be moved to the west side eventually through that attrition. So you're creating higher density in neighborhoods where people also live and work in the community and taking them from another one. So I understand the concerns about STRs. I do. I have STRs in my neighborhood. There are 4 of us that live on the block. We've got about that many STRs within 100 feet of each one of the residents. And if we put in place density restrictions like the 100 feet, then some of them would go away. And that's more true. There's a lot more density in the Presidents, down by the beach. You know, certainly the west side has its fair share of density and STRs. I'd say as a percentage, probably much more than anything on the east side. When you consider all the homes, not just on the Haystack Heights, but also in the other areas by the RV park and so forth.
Does anyone else have comments they'd like to make?
I did like the idea of twice a month. I think that would, I've heard from different management companies that they would like that. I don't think 165 is quite right. I'd like to see it a little higher. I do like the suggestion of a percentage, which would keep us in line with how our growth is. That's it. Thank you.
Well, I mean, the only thing that we should be considering is, you know, whether we want to count the 165. My question was, how did we come up with that 165? You know, haven't been here long enough that, you know, that was one of my questions. How do we come up with the 165 from the 200?
That was quite an interesting conversation at city council.
Yeah, the city council.
With city council.
Yeah, I came back to 165.
Mhm.
It was, you know, I wasn't aware of that number.
Yeah, I mean, I saw those city council meetings and then that was kind of one of those things, but then I'm not sure exactly how we came up with 165. The density part, that's, you know, that's what I agree more that, you know, once we get that settled, that would be best. We are running about 200, it will be 195 to 200. And it has been like that for, I don't know, 15 years, so. Again, that was my only question, you know, it would be the density part that I would be more inclined to and just figure it out, getting those down, so.
From the density perspective, as I understand it, not that we could recommend that tonight anyway, because that's not for us. But Jeff, am I correct that that actually would result in fewer overall permits than the current cap if there was a 100-foot buffer on every?
I don't know if I've actually run that.
Okay.
Number. I mean, it would affect, I think, I said in the staff report.
55%.
Yeah.
So it's a large percentage.
A large percentage of them.
Correct.
So, you know, how that's played out, technically, I haven't been running.
Oh, and I know we're here simply to address the cap. However, since we're talking about STR, I think it would be prudent of us to have recommendations concerning the STR codes, taken up to city council, so that we don't have to go through this whole thing again, you know, maybe as a footnote or something for them to discuss. But, and if, I think it does check, I've heard that number 55%, I think from you, Jeff, that we have a density of 100 feet, I think it was. So, and I think that's the minimum that I would like to go is 100 feet, maybe you could go 75, but the lot size is not sure how that would really work out. But, I think as a footnote, we should recommend twice a month to reduce the number of visits to the STRs, provide more flexibility and potentially greater income, especially during the holidays that are close together for STR owners and occupants to come in, and that will provide more housing during holidays for retail shops.
Jeff, has that been a point of conversation in terms of city council recommendations, whether they wanted to consider it twice a month as opposed to 14 days?
They have, all we've been asked was the cap.
Okay.
Yeah. But not to say that, like you said, your recommendation, they're going to get the record. And so they're gonna get everything you say tonight, and so, you know, they'll take that into account.
And finally, for me, I think that if we're going with the comprehensive plan and livability and quality of life, I think a density makes a lot more sense than a cap. Because the density means that everybody experiences a little bit of space between themselves and the STRs if they're an issue. And that, you know, that creates its own cap because, you know, there are boundaries to Cannon Beach City.
Yeah, my only comments really are specifically to the cap, what we've been asked to discuss. And I have been pretty underwhelmed with the amount of evidence that supports placing the cap, other than some public comment around, at least do something. And that's not an adequate justification to me to make a change in the code. So I really don't support the cap as it's presented to us today.
And would you support the cap if it was a percentage as opposed to a set?
All I need is a justification. Everyone that I have heard from says this won't affect available housing, that there's no direct tie between short-term rentals and workforce housing. And no one has presented any evidence that I'm aware of that says different.
Any other comments? At this point, would anyone like to make a motion regarding a recommendation? And remember, the recommendation would be to recommend or not recommend that this ordinance be enacted. And then it would go to city council, and city council will make the determination. This is just our recommendation to city council.
I move that we recommend to city council that different types of restrictions be considered rather than a cap.
Should we want to recommend what kind of restrictions, maybe like trench density or?
Well, that's part of the record, you know, we talked about density, and you know, I don't think we need a cap. I'm with Les. I don't think we need a cap because, right now, it's been that way for 15 years. And I don't see that that's going to grow or, you know, a cap, in my mind, would be reasonable if we were trying to get a handle on the growth. But the growth just isn't there. After 15 years, we've not seen it. And again, I know we're not addressing the affordable housing issues here, but if you can rent your house out, as an STR, you're gonna do it probably, and either that or not have, I mean, it's not gonna go into the affordable housing, group, if. So trying to put a cap on that just doesn't mean that the houses are going to be affordable to anyone. I think that the lease to local program that we're looking at very seriously is a much better help than some of the other, steps that the city is taking, investing money, so you can get funds, et cetera, go a lot farther than this 10% of the total housing stock in STRs. Okay, so back to my motion. All right. I move that, we ask the city council to forego a cap and consider other restrictions on STR for a better residential quality of life for that issue.
I think Jeff has a point for.
Yeah,
Just ask that you, maybe make an amendment just to say that you, deny the, application, or the recommended ordinance, as written, and then what you.
perfect. Thank you, Jeff. I move that we deny the recommended, ordinance of 165 cap and further recommend that the city council look at other ways of restricting STRs because there still is an issue that the cap will not solve. How would we want to say that?
Should we add recommendations on how to do that, such as percentage based on existing number of firms, consideration of zoning areas?
Yeah.
And, there's one other thing, density.
Yeah.
So based on the three items,
Yeah.
existing percentage, density, and further investigation of restriction on zoning.
Is that a second?
Okay, you have seconds? Any further discussion before the vote? Tessa, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Commissioner Wade,
Yes.
Commissioner Pierce Solution? Yes. Commissioner Orloff,
Yes.
Commissioner Ridley,
Yes.
Vice Chair Morris.
Yes. The recommendation is that this cap not be adopted and that alternative solutions be considered. At this time, we will now move on to our next agenda item. And that is a work session item. This is reviewed chapter 1762 signs and a discussion of signage in Cannon Beach. This is a reminder that the planning commission work sessions are an opportunity for the planning commission to gather pertinent specific topics. It is solely the commission's discretion to allow public input on such topics. After presentation by staff with relevant material, planning commission questions, I will ask whether we wish to hear from the public. So this will be slightly different than our other items. We will begin with the staff report and then we will decide whether to call. So, Jeff, do you have a presentation?
Yes, I will have a limited presentation tonight on this time. I want to just bring here from the staff report. So, the signage ordinance, in each municipal code 1762 signs regulates all signs in residential properties, commercial properties, or downtown districts, and total on residential. The DRB held an initial signage work session in February and continued the discussion in March of how the current ordinance functions, from types of signs, posting of signs, sizing of signs, to scope of review, non-conformity, and concerns, to the look and feel that visitors to the Oregon Coast have come to recognize as distinctly Canyon Beach. The DRB also recognized some of the challenges in current language regarding materials, definitional ambiguities, and administrative procedures. Although the Canyon Beach Municipal Code does not have powers and duties regarding ordinance amendments as the code states. The purpose of design review, is to exercise aesthetic judgment over development projects within the city in order to maintain the desirable character of the community. The community character is defined by having charm in the design of buildings, keeping buildings small in scale, honoring the beauty and ecology of the city's natural setting, and recognizing that the arts are an integral part of the community. Since the DRB has such a vital role of considering applications regarding signs, staff asked for their recommendations to be brought forward for your consideration of changes to the sign ordinance. Staff also posted between Development Department page and the City of Cannon Beach's website, a signage 2026 page, which hosts the meeting materials for the various signage discussions with additional materials regarding the drafting of sign ordinances and model ordinances from advocacy organizations, the community signage ordinances from across the country. The community model ordinances offer a range of signage ordinances from Ashland, Oregon, which is very similar to our current language, to other traditional ordinances, to form-based code influence versions, such as Beaufort, South Carolina. As the public process continues, staff will continue to update the signage 2026 page with the latest meeting materials, as well as all the materials referenced during the community discussions. The design review board met June 11th to make minor revisions and offer the draft, the DRB recommended sign ordinance attachment A1 for consideration. The major changes including striking references of a building frontage, which has been incorporated under the building frontage, and new definition for incidental sign to clear up the vagueness of the current language. There is also clarification of the definition of a wooden sign and the materials allowed under a permanent sign. Major structural changes to the ordinance include placing 1, total signage square footage, 2, total signage square footage per business, and 3, types of signs under each base area, while introducing a new table to summarize these. Exemptions and the permitting requirements have been clarified, and new sections to describe the review procedures have been introduced to provide sign applicants clear guidance for proceeding through the process. So, like I said, I put the actual recommended draft from the DRB in your packets as attachment A1. Tonight would like to just go through kind of the major themes or changes or why they did this or why we've done this. And then I would propose that we do next month a joint work session with the DRB. And I will actually, in the new facilities, give you a new presentation showing all the details. And then you'll have their input, their comments, and be able to ask them questions and further drill down on some of the points I'm gonna go through tonight. But tonight, I just wanted to introduce the ordinance to you briefly of how and why it came about, the changes, and then suggest we do that next meeting. Basically, any community I've ever worked in, the most controversial is always the signage ordinance. It's like, you know, I don't care where you're at, signs are always an issue, and it is a ordinance that's often in fluctuation. It's a kind of a living document in a lot of communities. And I mentioned that if you go to our website, I've got some best practices from not only planning groups and organizations that deal with signage, but also from benchmark communities from around across the country. And so you can see the ranges. But I will note that our ordinances, like so much of Cannon Beach, has not been changed in years. And so it does need some changes, and especially I feel, you know, that what's happened is that, you know, I think that like a wooden sign or things like that, there's a lot of technical changes that happen in the industry of producing signs and the techniques of making those signs. And so, unless, you know, that language kind of improves to get that, you know, what is the difference between, or, you know, like when I was doing my first stint, I believe that the DRB at that time, had a more open, say, if it looked like wood, then it was fine, that was fine, make it look like wood. But it could still be with some new technologies, it could be made of, poly, plastic material or something like that, that lasts longer or whatever. But, I think definitely has changed, since I went away, now they've come back. But I do believe the DRB is one of the main reasons they wanted to change. They want to get back to that more 1970s approach, or that earlier approach, where almost every sign is more of an artwork than truly, just a sign. And so they wanted to kind of rein in some of those definitions, on materials and things like that, but also look at the process of how it's reviewed, and then some of these new things that have come to bear on it, like banners and things like that, temporary signs and things like that, and have that process in order to find in that there's administrative approval, then there's more of a minor approval on a signage type of, like a temporary basis or an emergency basis, and then one that would go for full review. And so, that was my understanding from kind of working with the DRB over the last few months on this. And so, in the packet materials, signage, discussion starts on page 263 of the electronic version, of the packet. And, you will see the strike throughs are the red line versions. And, you will also see, some that are highlighted, and those mean in that very last session, we had the final recommendations, some minor changes on that. But to walk through, you can see wooden signs, we combine that, being the sign made of solid wood and not of engineered wooden composite or faux wooden veneer finishes. We changed what an incidental sign means, a sign intended primarily for the convenience and this direction of the public on the premises, which is not advertised, but is informational only, includes. So we kind of define more specifically some of this language, because what we were finding was a lot of people were putting up a lot of what we would consider, we in the older days would consider incidental signs, but that's because it was very broad in term. There was really no definition. And so we wanted a clear definition and to put kind of limits where all of those are included in your total square footage of sign. So when you're putting that up, you have to be aware of all of those calculations and how they calculate into that. So that, if you move on to like page 267, where we're actually getting into what a sign is, we kind of define that a little better. You'll see number 5 says the maximum sign space area for an individual shop sign shall be no more than 24 square feet or 1 square foot of sign space per real business frontage. There were originally 3 different frontages we dealt with: business, building, and business, building, and site. So there were 3 different, we narrowed them down to 2 now. And then, prohibited signs, where there are some things that we come across in our compliance, that, need better definition. I will have some pictures of those at our next presentation, because we will go through that with you, kind of walk you through some of these where, say someone has a neon sign or lit sign, if that's interior and inside the building, is that counting as a sign that's seen from the public? So we'll walk through that kind of thing with you guys, and how, the current ordinance will treat that. And then the materials you'll see, which is on page 269 of the electronic version, which is 176230. You'll see under J, materials, every sign, all parts, portions, or material thereof must be manufactured, assembled, and erected in compliance with state, federal, and city regulations. You'll see that the current code that we're working with refers to the uniform sign code from 1985. No one has ever known where that is, but it lives and still in our code. So we corrected that and put a more applicable reference there. And then number 2, permanent signs shall be constructed of wood or have a wood sign face over structural components with oil, acrylic or latex paints and recycled water-based paints, or be part of an awning. Window signs are to be painted on a etched glass. And so what we're trying to do is really define, what, a little more detail in what it can be. And then color, there's, I mentioned a color in there about day glow and fluorescent. Well, now we define it as best we can in K, line 144 on page 5 of the actual ordinance, or 269 on the electronic. But if you look at that, you will also see at the end, we've included a color range. Those are the color ranges that is. And then as far as the regulations, like I said, we broke that down into base zone regulations as it currently is with the commercial and those types of uses. And then you have a total sign square footage permitted per lot. Now that is just, if it was one business on one lot, they could have that thing. And then we have number 2, which is for most of ours, which are these business complexes where there's more than one business per lot. So that is total sign square footage permitted per business. And so there's very few lot kind of restriction. There are a few, but most of ours are done through this total sign square footage permitted per business. And you'll see that how that's broken out, and we'll go into kind of a where this came from to the future in the presentation of next month's meeting. And then we have the different types of signs, and this is going to get into what we'll talk about as kind of one of the major changes in that the procedures or the review. Who does the review of which signs? And so beforehand, it was all freestanding signs came before the DRB, wall or projecting signs and other side window signs. If the window signs were just painted or etched on, like our language said, then they did not need to come before DRB review. And so the majority of what the DRB full review for the freestanding signage, or those that asked for not to be a wood sign or a window non-paint or etch. And so that was how we operated. We did change a few of the things in the exemptions about trying to clear up some of the language, and this is a 176250. So we made an A sign other than neon signs, internally lighted or any other prohibited sign within a non-commercial building visible from exterior of the building. So what we're trying to say in this is that, if it's visible from the sidewalk, then yes, and it's lit or whatever, then that's not going to be allowed. Up to 3 flags of national, state government, or non-commercial matters. So if somebody wanted to fly a flag right now of their American Legion or whatever, under our current ordinances, you would not be allowed to do that. So we're trying to make that more rational. There's people that want to fly flags and, they're not selling Coca-Cola or something like that on that flag, we're going to allow those types of flags.
They just want to support their soccer team.
That's right. There you go. Yeah. I argued, so you couldn't have the big Georgia G. Governmental signs erected on public lands, will be exempt, temporary political signs not exceeding 6 square feet, and so I took that from, another jurisdiction, and so we can reg on political signs with size and, yeah. Temporary, non-illuminated real estate, and put a definition that more, clarification on that number, because I have worked in certain jurisdictions. I don't think it's used as much here, but in some jurisdictions, some of these real estate signs get huge and they're getting, a little bit out of it. So, put some clarification on that, and then temporary window signs that advertise seasonal or citywide events, those are also exempt. And then the permit kind of process and review process, those are fairly new. We didn't really, you couldn't find them, or they were not, easily located. We wanted to clarify that. And like I said, the review procedures, which is 1762-75, each of the following signs are subject to review by the design review board as non-hearing items. And so what I mean by non-hearing items is that it means that people aren't coming and giving pro cons against signs. It is just comes before the DRB, and then they make the decision on the sign. And each of the following signs are subject to design review board chair. Replacement signs for new or existing businesses where temporary signage is requested, or emergency signs where construction or normal business activities are impacted and temporary signage is warranted. So there's really these two levels. A, the ones that all go before, and that's new replacement or existing permanent signs. So any permanent sign, whereas before, like I said, it was just the freestanding signs or those that weren't wooden or whatever. I think we're kind of the exceptions. Now, any permanent sign will come before the DRB, full DRB board, except for these, emergency or temporary type signs that I highlight in the, and then, let's see, on that line 299, the design review board may require the condition of approval of the community development department be notified at least 48 hours prior to the erection of the approved sign to verify placement, establishment, and material with the sign posted. So what, has been happening is, we may have a sign approved, a wooden sign approved. We find out after it's been replaced or whatever that it's not, it's a faux wood or something like that. And so we now the DRB can condition that we're there when they put that up, and so, they verify the material. And then you will see a table that kind of explains all of that in the back, line 341, through 343. And then, like I said, we added those color swatches, for neon and such. And so any questions, or do you need any more, anything that you want us to kind of look at going before the next one?
And no, I look forward to hearing from DRB itself.
Okay.
Right. Definitely haven't had to deal with signs, so I look forward to their questions. I know they do that regularly.
Yeah.
Looks like there may be a contradiction between line, 214 on the square footage of the temporary lawn sign. And then in the table, looks like it shows 12 square feet instead of the 6 square feet.
Okay, look at, compared to the table,
Yeah, compared to the table, it looks like.
very well could happen during the.
Well, this is a lot of work, and I really appreciate it, that you've done here. This is, comprehensive stuff.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. We needed something like this desperately, I think, because, 1985 doesn't exist.
yeah, yeah.
And then I was wondering about, enforcement, and, are there punitive damages, or punitive rather, what do they get as far as punitive?
I think our orders is it at the time, or something like that. I think.
And I didn't see where it spoke to that.
Yeah, I
So
looked at that and looked at that. add the kind of enforcement language and, yeah. But that-
Yeah, that doesn't look like it, goes back and says, you know, if failure to comply or whatever, you know, $500 seems pretty cheap for something like that. But of course, if they have to throw away the sign that's there, it could be very expensive or, you know, change it or something like that, so $500 just a cherry on top, maybe.
I had a couple of questions. One, in the definitions, this will probably help me out. Short-term rental company sign is always posted on the building. What kind of sign is that? I still, from the language, I still can't quite figure it out. I think Daniel's been considering it an incidental sign, but
I think that's a great clarification.
they really go.
Yeah, I don't think we read that in the definition.
Yeah.
I had a question, kind of around the, glare on, line 108. I wondered if it would be appropriate to have some kind of dark sky reference in there.
Yeah, and what line number do you have?
108, that's H dot glare,
Okay,
just a thought.
yeah.
Yeah.
There.
So actually, you talked about this one, it's 256, where you talked about signs other than neon signs, internally lighted or other prohibited sign within a non-commercial building. I can't understand that sentence at all.
Yeah, it is, I think that sentence alone it's been difficult for,
Well,
Ballard.
you too, but.
Yeah.
Or all, I couldn't
But,
figure it
but
out.
let me see if I can clarify that, but it is not an easy sense. What we're trying to say is, you know, if it's if it's not in a commercial building, then we're trying to have I lived on Ross Lane, I would walk by on Spruce, one of those houses had a neon sign inside that said something like love or something like that. Just said it's not in a commercial building, it's fine, you know, I think, so it's something like that, so I will definitely look at that, though. Try to make it easy to read.
And my last comment was simply around the sign permit. It's not apparent to me who is the permitting entity, is it community development?
Yeah.
Who's covering that?
Okay, I'll clarify that.
Okay, thank you.
On the interior neon signs that are non-commercial, is the city not allowed to regulate in residential? Cause that seems like kind of a nuisance. Just
No, they
I
can.
think that would be okay.
They can, I mean, well, you know, it's currently not being done, but
Yeah.
yes, we could do that, and that's just, you know, it hasn't come up, I haven't, I mean, I can say it came up when my first time here, because somebody did complain about that
Yeah.
sign, and that's why I said, well, you know, it's not.
Maybe that's a point of conversation with DRB to ask if they know that that's worth addressing.
I agree.
Well,
So we're
DRB
gonna
is not,
now.
Yeah.
DRB is not gonna be involved in residential.
Well, the thing is, that's why I just asked Jeff whether they could, and it sounds like in fact, that could be part of this ordinance. So that it might not be DRB reviewing it, but DRB may have input on whether that makes sense,
Sorry.
because they have considered signs in a way that we have never considered signs.
When we had the small group working on dark sky as an additional code, that was addressed with that person. I shot that.
Right, so this is where I think we should be thinking about it, because this is an opportunity to make sure this doesn't become a citywide issue. Do we have any other comments or questions for staff?
Look forward to next month.
So we have, I'm assuming we need to still discuss, would we like to open to public input? We will be returning to this conversation with DRB next month. We have the opportunity in this case to still allow public input. Would we like to take that opportunity?
I don't see why not. I think the public should be involved.
All right, so then in that case, I will now ask if there are any individuals here who would like to make comment on this work session item. Hearing none, we will move on. So we have our next work session item, which is the transportation system plan. This is a review of the proposed transportation system plan implementation. This is a reminder that the planning commission work sessions are an opportunity for us to gather and discuss information pertinent to specific topics. And it is solely at the commission's discretion to allow public input on such topics. After a presentation by staff of the relevant material and planning commission questioning, I will ask the planning commission whether we would like to hear from the public. Do staff have a presentation at this time?
I do, I will walk through the presentation that's in the packets if you have those. Let me pull that up, Robert, it's page 285. Yeah, and I'm not going to read through the staff report. I think you guys are familiar that we passed the TSP transportation system plan back in, I think it was 22, back when I was here, and it was adopted. And so I brought it up at the, or I came back and at the annual retreat, the city council. They said yes, they wanted to move forward on some of those projects this year. So looking through our ordinances, I'll go to that first page, Robert, and gives really the powers of looking at traffic and parking issues to the planning commission. And so that next page there, part of the powers there would then fall under what we call perform other functions as indicated, city or state law required by city council. And the city council, like I said, turn kind of an annual review over for you guys to look. But if you look at other committees and also those that are involved in transportation, trails, parking, all of these different things that the TSP addresses, you will see that Public Works is also under F, under direction of the council, to charge with looking at roads, streets, and transportation, and will recommend strategies and policies for expansion and improvements of these systems. So Public Works has a role to play in this, and then after those projects and improvements are, designed, then they need to go before, some of them may need to go before the DRB, and those are the public improvements that are under 174420 there. And then the TSP also has language regarding improvement or corrections or language corrections to our current code. And so as part of our code rewrite, our goal will be to also include these, which should be coming before you guys in a couple of months, with what we're calling our housekeeping changes. So a collection of various language that, going back to 2020 really, that we've been kind of saying, we're saying we need to change this and this and this. And so we're going to be bringing and packaging those forward. So on the next slide, it says there's a question mark of existence. So what's the existing process? Well, when we got this together, I don't really know an existing process. And so I went before the Public Works Committee last month, I think it was, and spoke to them with this exact same presentation, because my thought was that it's really the Public Works and your role to be looking for that TSP plan, saying these, and hearing and taking comments from the public through the year and saying these are the projects we would like to see moving forward, recommending those along to the city council. But previously, the city did have an annual look at annual parking, at least parking and some transportation issues. And I went back, and that's what these slides represent, or taken from the 2016, 2017 agendas, showing the city council looked at it. The planning commission also looked at it. Here's a staff report from 2014, looking at certain items and making certain recommendations up to the city. And some of the projects that developed out of that. So when the TSP was, produced, it recommended 58 total strategies and improvements. And of those 58, we've completed or initiated 3 by my count, and we are now in the 4th year. And so it's my goal at least to get a process going, so that we start looking at this, because if anything that I know, when I came back, I think I hear more parking problems than when I left. And so, you will note that we have started, and we'll get to that slide in a second, but we have started. And they started that at the annual retreat to start looking at certain projects. And one of the things they wanted to do was parking. And so the first thing that they did was to say, what are those first steps in the parking? And, you know, the hatching of the streets to make them, some kind of legible, parking stall. That was the first step recommended from that, and then they've already put that into motion. So goals, I'm not gonna go through the goals from the TSP or the objectives and all of that, the priorities. But just to say that they did have a near term, medium term, and long term, 0 to 5, 5 to 10, beyond 10 years in looking at this and what type of, and then identified for each one of the various areas, whether it's a roadway improvement, TDM improvement or whatever, they did those down into the cost analysis, the priority analysis, and then somewhat of a priority on that. You'll note that first one under roadway improvements, the intersection of South Hemlock, the one that I claimed credit for actually completing, that was really pretty much completed when we finished that, the TSP, so I don't know how much we really done. But like I said, there's the transportation management on that front. We've already had conversations with 4 different, of your apps and mobile apps and parking, charging for parking. Because they wanted us to start looking into that, and we will be going to them. I think it's August 11th work session. We'll have a kind of a report back on what we found out from that and whether they would want us to start proceeding on that front as well. So there are some things that they wanted to start, the city council started moving forward. And then this is to come up with a process. And so you'll see on the page, which 306 of the your electronic, that's the one with the 5 different steps into the parking strategy. And like I said, we was striping on-street parking stalls in downtown and midtown were 1 and 2. Third is to install clear legible signs for on-street parking stalls. We, like I said, had started looking at the management of those, and that's for the time restrictions and parking enforcement and all of that, time limited parking. Those are the next steps. We hopefully this year will start moving on all of that. So then the following steps are also part of that parking strategy. So implementation in the actual TSP, which is online and available at our website. You can look through the implementation and funding strategy, because they look at what we're currently are the funding balance and how much we actually give towards funding per year. And that is one of the reasons we want to start this process, is because we need to start as from a staff perspective. If we need to know what kind of projects that the community, you guys as the appointed elected officials want to see move forward, that gives us the time to say, well, here's our current budget, just even with the striping, how much that costs, you know? We didn't have that in a budget, so we need to start that to get to a budget, into the budget process, and then to have line items where we can look at certain things and start looking at grants that are out there and other things that we can keep stacked together to make some of these improvements happen. So even in that TSP report, they do a cost constrained model so that they can say, okay, if you are limited to just the certain amount that you're currently using, here's an approach that you could take. And they did a priorities on that. So that was another thing that, you know, I recommend everyone, before if we go through with this proposed process, which is the next page, page 310, where I've outlined kind of the process, and like I said, we spoke with Public Works about it. What it really will culminate with is an October meeting, or joint meeting with Public Works and the Planning Commission to sit down and have an annual kind of capital improvement plan, and to say, these are the projects that have moved through or what state they're at, and then say, these are the ones we've heard over the year. What we've done with Public Works is we have a process for complaints and suggestions and things for new sidewalks and crosswalks or whatever that come into us daily. Those will go before the Public Works at their meetings, and then all of those would then, you know, that didn't get completed during the year, that could be completed, some of them can, then they would come to this October meeting, and you guys would sit down and talk about what you feel the priorities are to move forward to the city council's annual retreat. Then they put that project list together, and that gives the staff some time to say, okay, looking at the budgets and what the grants are available, start piecing together certain projects that we could move forward. That is really what I wanted to talk about. I hope I didn't go too quickly through that and just confuse you. But it is you know, it's at least a proposed process. I have no, you know, there's nothing, like I tell anybody, I'm a thick-skinned, I'm a planner. If anybody has suggestions of a better process or a better way to do this, I'm always open to that. And that's why we want to bring it to both you and Public Works to say, hey, any feedback on this? Do you think this at least gives us a plan? Because currently we don't have a capital improvement process for any of this. And I mean, I've worked across the country, and I would say this is one of the only that I've worked in that doesn't have a capital improvement kind of annual plan in the state of Georgia. Just as you are held, if you are a jurisdiction, you have to complete a 10-year comprehensive plan, updated every 5 years. You turn that in with a 3-year capital improvement plan, which has to be updated annually, showing where you are on each one of the projects. And what that does is then get you, I think it's called qualified, whatever, or something like that. And then what that then does gives you access to all of their low funding grants and loans and stuff like that. And so it's a pretty good process. And you know, I work within that, I think, better to have that process so that we can, you know, people want a crosswalk. You get enough people in a room and they can say, we need a crosswalk at Gallup. And you say, well, in our conference, in our plan, TSP, it says for the presidential, the first priority is Monroe or wherever. I'm just saying that, you know, that's what you want. You don't want just, you know, whatever the controversy of the day to come at you. So that's why it's justification for this problem.
I don't know what this means, and I excuse myself for ignorance here. Mini mobility hub.
Okay, yes, a mini mobility hub. So mini mobility hub would be something like, let's just say, for instance, we took that public restroom area there, and we had lockers there and facilities for people to change and things like that. We had bike racks there. We also had, that's where the bus stops, right? So that is somewhat of a mini mobility hub. Often they have EV charging stations and park, but mini mobility hub is usually where you can transfer from one type of transportation to another, whether there's a pedestrian that leaves their bike at something, or a bus rider that leaves their bike at some place, or, you know, make some kind of transfer.
Thank you.
I really like the idea of a process. I think that's super important, and Jake, you're thinking about the process first, then we can do project planning after we know how we get there.
Yeah. Thank you.
So with my parks hat, my planning hat,
Very true.
although we are a subset of public works, we very rarely think about public works, and I don't believe public works thinks about us very much either. But we're having fairly robust conversations right now about trails, which are included in DSP.
Yeah.
And we have to be a part of that.
It should be, and honestly, I think,
Yes.
I take the blame for that, I think they should have been in this.
Frankly, I do too, because there's really I mean, we both come up underneath Chris.
Yeah.
But there's very little overlap between public works as they do their thing and what Parks thinks about.
Excellent point. Thank you.
Okay. One last thing, and it has nothing to do with any of this, maybe I should, no, I'm gonna put it for the good order. Can somebody drive down these streets and think about which sides are posted, no parking on this side, with an eye toward when we're full in the summer, there still would be a room for because it don't work.
So I honestly think that, you know, that right there to me is, what, the PM3, the third one on step one, install clear legible time to Elm Street parking stall. If, that should be put in fire, and we need to have an actual map showing, you know, where it is public parking and where it is designated no parking, you know, and so that should be one of our goals, I think, by the October meeting. And, you know, hopefully, I know Trevor's probably listening, but, hopefully, Public Works will give me everything now. Right? But I would commit myself to putting it together.
I think it would be good.
And at least give us, so that's gonna be, part of the conversation about, you know, when we do this planning about where we need to look at certain changes, so.
Cool.
Yeah, comprehensive review of all the streets, their width, their length, and their ability to hold it, whatever capacity of parking needs to be done before we can put in place these restrictions, because just like one of the commenters this evening said, since they've been charging at Tolavana, you know, the parking has exploded into our residential area. And as I've said before here and before city council, or matter of fact, before Public Works, that needs to be done, and every single beach access point, near residential areas on both sides of Hemlock are extremely impacted, you know, not only for that affects safety and the ability of first responders, the ability of residents to have, you know, a little bit of peace and quiet, the traffic coming through there and the dust.
One thing to note though on that, Steve, what I would say is that what I just promised was kind of what I would call, what is that, you know, from a more of a operational or police enforcement kind of mapping. What you're asking for is, I think, a true transportation study. It needs to have some engineers look at that, because you're looking at width, you're looking at the capacities of the capacities of the, right-of-way areas, for parking, because, you know, a lot of the, we say, oh, we can park from the, east side, or, no, the west side of, say, the presidential on the ones going west, right, or whatever. But if you look at the actual number of parking spaces, when you cancel out how many are used by driveways and stuff like that, you know, what is the capacity, true capacity? And I think that really needs to be investigated.
Yeah, my point is we've got to start somewhere with that, and I'm right now advocating collecting data. And I'm really glad the Public Works Committee is being integrated into this process. I think it's, if you read their charter, it's definitely part of their charter, and so much more that has been ignored by the Public Works Department, and I think sometimes tamped down, you know, with respect to, hey, we don't have a process for that, so really, why even kind of talk about it past? And, you know, this 2016 talk about parking, these comments, I totally agree, Jeff. 2016 to 2026, in the last 10 years, the parking has, and the visitors, the number of visitors that we have just exploded. And it affects quality of life in a lot of ways. And I think that the parking and the traffic patterns and other things are greatly affected for quality of life for residents.
Yeah, safety.
And yeah, safety, we should even be looking at speed bumps, you know, and other signage that tells us that on all gravel roads, the state mandated speed limit is 15 miles per hour, but you really don't see those 15-mile-an-hour signs. There's one up in Warren, way as you enter into the Haystack Heights area, but that's a paved, road but it's posted 15 miles per hour. And I would even suggest putting like speed bumps up in that area, because it is more residential than some of our other areas. But yeah, gathering data and the Public Works Committee certainly can play a role in that. I know they've gathered other data about street conditions and so forth in the past. And they were efficient with that. And we need to start somewhere, because if we start putting these restrictions in place, people are gonna find other places to park where they can park for greater than 3 hours or not pay anything or whatever the motive might be.
Does anyone else wish to make any further comment? In that case, let's move on to the tree report.
Are y'all okay with that proposed process then? Yeah, that's perfect.
Tree report for each month, June was relatively busy. We had a total of 34 trees removed. The majority of that was for construction. That was primarily at 2 properties, one on Elliott and also one on Haystack. There is a relatively limited replanting requirement due to the number of trees that were removed on our urban sites. Are there questions?
Just curious, what is new SFD? Does that mean new building?
New single family dwelling.
So can I tell you guys this, I don't know, did I tell you all this, when I went up to, I served on the building official, for Classic County, the building official for the selection committee. And, the, community development director there, we were sitting down, getting ready to do the interview, and she said, Jim, you was a tree before. Ah, yeah, that's Kennedy.
I was proud of it.
Hey, it's important to have priorities.
Yes.
Makes us Cannon Beach.
But speaking as a tree, I'm always disappointed when there's not more trees required to replant, but I do know what the rules say.
Yeah. So that is influenced by a handful of things. Take, for example, the 107 Elliott. There's a significant amount of tree density toward the rear end of the lot that's unaffected by the project. So they have a very high amount of density. They didn't affect the density on site to the point that they needed to do replant. And that's frequently what comes up.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have seen what I think is a general trend, of folks trying to preserve the trees. I think a little more so than we had a couple of years ago. And I think that's really all we need is a second look to try to cut as few down as but it's their lot, they're free to do, build their home, I understand that.
For the good of the order, does anyone have items for good of the order? In that case, we are adjourned.
Yeah, let you know, City Hall should be open, next week, pretty much moved in over there, we don't have servers working yet, or we're not fully online, but yeah, it's gonna be great, the next meeting will be there, so.
What about the ceremony? When's the ceremony, please?